Every empire dreams of victory, flags raised, enemies defeated, history books rewritten by the winners, but history hides a darker truth. Sometimes winning the war destroys the empire that wins it. This story begins with a paradox. The most powerful empire on earth wins the greatest war in human history. It stands victorious on every continent. Its enemies are broken. And yet, within a single generation, that same empire loses its wealth, its currency, and its global dominance. This is capital and conquest, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. When people think about the collapse of empires, they imagine defeat. They imagine invading armies and burning capitals. But history shows something more dangerous. Victory can be just as fatal as defeat. The British Empire entered World War II as the largest empire the world had ever seen. It controlled roughly 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. Nearly 1/4 of the global population lived under its rule. The British pound was the backbone of international trade. London was the financial heart of the world. By 1945, Britain had won. Nazi Germany was defeated. Imperial Japan surrendered. British soldiers returned home as heroes. On paper, Britain stood among the victors. In reality, it was bankrupt. To understand why victory destroyed the British Empire, we need to go back to how modern wars are paid for. Wars are not paid for with courage. They are paid for with money. And when the bills come due, empires crack. In 1939, Britain entered World War II with limited cash reserves and a fragile economy still recovering from the Great Depression. The government faced an immediate problem. It needed weapons, fuel, food, ships, and aircraft on an industrial scale. Taxes alone could not cover the cost. So Britain did what empires have always done. It borrowed. At first, Britain borrowed from its own citizens. War bonds flooded the market. Savings were redirected into the war machine. But this was not enough. The war dragged on. Costs exploded. By 1941, Britain had spent nearly all its gold and dollar reserves. It could no longer pay for supplies from abroad. The empire that once financed the world was running out of money. What happened next changed the global financial system forever. In March 11, 1941, the United States passed the Lend-Lease Act. On the surface, it was aid, weapons, food, fuel, ships, all supplied to Britain and other allies. No immediate payment required. But beneath the surface, Lend-Lease was a financial turning point. Britain was no longer the creditor. It was the debtor. By the end of the war, Britain owed the United States billions of dollars. Not metaphorical billions. Real debts, written in contracts, payable in hard currency. Production tells the story. Britain devoted more than half of its entire economic output to the war effort at its peak. Civilian consumption collapsed. Infrastructure decayed. Homes were destroyed. Factories wore out faster than they could be repaired. Victory came at an enormous cost. By 1945, Britain's national debt exceeded 250% of its gross domestic product. Let that sink in. For every pound the country produced in a year, it owed more than 2 pounds in debt. The empire had survived the war, its finances had not. And yet, the war was not over for Britain. The bills were just beginning. In 1946, Britain negotiated a massive loan from the United States. The amount was $3.75 billion, plus an additional loan from Canada. The terms were harsh. Britain had to make the pound convertible to dollars. It had to open its markets. It had to accept the rules of a new financial order. This was not charity, this was leverage. The moment the pound became convertible in 1947, a crisis erupted. Investors rushed to exchange pounds for dollars. Britain's reserves collapsed in weeks. Convertibility was suspended. Confidence shattered. The pattern was clear. Victory had drained Britain's financial blood. But the damage did not stop with debt. Maintaining an empire is expensive. Colonies require administrators, soldiers, infrastructure, and subsidies. Before the war, Britain could afford this because its economy dominated global trade. After the war, it could not. One by one, the pillars of empire cracked. In 1947, Britain withdrew from India. Not because it wanted to, because it could no longer afford to rule it. In 1956, the Suez Crisis exposed the new reality. Britain attempted to assert control over the Suez Canal. Militarily, it succeeded. Financially, it was crushed. The United States threatened to dump British pounds. Britain's currency came under attack. Within days, Britain was forced to withdraw. That moment marked the end of Britain as a global imperial power. It had won the war. It had lost the system. What survived? Not the empire, not the currency, What survived were those who understood the shift before it became obvious. British elites quietly moved capital abroad. Assets flowed into dollars. Investments shifted to the United States. Those with international diversification preserved their wealth. Those who trusted imperial stability did not. If this sounds familiar, it should. The pattern repeats. Victory often hides financial collapse. Wars concentrate power. They also concentrate debt. The winners inherit the bills. History shows this pattern again and again. After the Napoleonic Wars, Britain itself imposed crushing debts on France. The French state survived. Its finances suffered for decades. After World War I, Germany was forced to pay reparations. The result was hyperinflation. Social collapse followed. After World War II, Britain avoided military defeat. But its economy was hollowed out. Its empire dissolved. The same story, different names. So what does this mean today? Modern wars are even more expensive. They rely on technology, logistics, global supply chains, and permanent readiness. Governments no longer raise taxes to pay for them. They borrow, they print, they defer the pain. In the early 21st century, global military spending exceeds $2 trillion per year. That number is not sustained by savings, it is sustained by debt. Major powers run permanent deficits. Central banks expand balance sheets. Currency dilution replaces honest taxation. This is not theory. This is documented fact. History shows that the real cost of war is paid later. Paid through inflation. Paid through debt. Paid through lost dominance. The most chilling lesson is this. Winning the battlefield does not guarantee winning the future. Empires fall when their financial systems break, not when their armies lose. So how do people survive these moments? History shows three consistent principles. First, understand that power systems are fragile. They look permanent until they are not. Second, wealth tied to a single empire is vulnerable. Real resilience comes from flexibility. Third, debt always demands payment. If not through taxes, then through inflation or collapse. The survivors of history were not the most patriotic. They were the most aware. After Britain's victory, those who adapted early preserved their wealth. Those who trusted the old system watched it dissolve. The question is not whether victory carries a cost. History shows it always does. The question is whether you will recognize the pattern before the bill arrives. History does not repeat, but if you do not understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I will show you where to look.